Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me enormous pleasure, and it's a privilege to me to be invited to do this. The first speaker of the day is a highly respected physician known to many of us, Dr. Peter Fenwick. Dr. Fenwick was formerly consultant in charge of the neuropsychiatric and epilepsy unit at the Maudsley Hospital. He's co-director of research at the Department of Neurophysiology, Broadmoor Hospital, and consultant neuropsychiatrist at the London Sleep Centre, running a clinical and forensic practice. For the last 9 years, he's been studying magnetic field tomography at the Rixon Neuroscience Institute, Japan. In the UK, he's researching near-death experiences in coronary care units and surveying approaching death experiences in hospices and nursing homes in southern England. So it gives me an enormous pleasure to invite Dr. Peter Fenwick. Please show your attention.
First of all, can you all hear? Yeah, at the back. Great, okay. And let me start by thanking the organisers of this conference for inviting me to be here. It's a great pleasure. And I'd like to say that I'm sorry Dr. Melina Nobre is not here, because I knew her and met her on several occasions. So I'd like to dedicate this talk to her. So we're going to talk about shining light on death. It's as it's the beginning of the British branch of the Spiritus Association, I thought we ought to make sure that people were familiar with both Kardec, who will be talked about later, and Chico Xavier. How many of you do not know about Chico Xavier? Okay, right. So this is going to be for you. So the plan is, I'll talk about Chico Xavier, then I'm going to talk about existential death anxiety. It's something which is really important for us now. Then new information about death is an expansion of consciousness, and then the similarity between death and NDEs. So Chico Xavier, a most amazing man, really the medium of the century. I don't think that I know a medium who is as talented as Chico is. Certainly I haven't come across it, because one of the things he could do is he could write books which psychograph, which in fact came from the spirit realm, and which he could do extraordinarily well. I expect many of you have seen Chico writing, those who know him, and you'll see that he in fact was writing as quickly as he could like this, and somebody would put another piece of paper and he'd write like that. He's an astonishing man. He worked in a simple governmental job and only used this income to live on, so he was a very moral person. When asked by the parents of a murdered girl, he spoke to her in the spirit realm and found out who murdered her and told the police where to find the evidence. I mean, it's an astonishing story. The judge convicted on the evidence. When he was writing, he did it at such speed that the person beside him had to change the paper. A fantastic, loving individual. That comes through in all his writings and all the people who knew him. Would always give blessings to those who were waiting in the queue to see him. Mark you, the queues were very long and would go on well into the night and early morning, but he still would do it until the last person was seen. Was loved by Brazilians and nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And in fact, one of the things that he wanted to do was to die when the Brazilians were all happy. And you know when they were all happy, when they won the World Cup, of course. Do you remember Madonna's Hand of God? Very talented. He was born on April the 2nd, 1910, to a lottery ticket vendor the age of 5, his mother died, and then he went through a horrendous period with his godmother. She was extremely cruel to him, would poke him in the abdomen with forks and not let him pull them out. And I think he had a terrible time. And he only gained solace during these times by speaking with the spirit of his dead mother. So you can see from a very early age, he had this capacity. Finished primary school aged 14 and never went back. And do remember this, those of you who don't know it, that his books, in fact, were all written by somebody who had educational level of just primary school. But they are really wonderfully formulated books. And clearly the information he had is coming from somewhere, but not from his schooling. When 21, he met his spirit mentor, Emmanuel. I like the bit that people talk about, under a tree. And he was given the task to write 50 books. And he said to Emmanuel, "How on earth can I write 50 books?" And he said, "Discipline, discipline, and discipline." I think that's something we can all remember. He started his amazing career in psychography, and he wrote in all 469 books. Anybody here written 469 books? It's really an achievement. And he died, as I said, in 2002. He never kept any money from his books. It all went to the Spiritist movement. An astonishing man. And I would suggest those of you who are interested should look up his life. But we fortunately have somebody in the audience who saw Chico, and that's Elsa Rossi. And Elsa has very kindly said that if any of you people, Elsa, where are you? Over there. If any of you would like to talk to her about Chico, she'd be very happy to mention it. And the book, if you want it, it's Guy Playfair's Medium of the Century. And indeed he was. And Elsa told me that, in fact, this was published by the Elsa Rossi Publishing House. So fantastic. Okay, but that's just an introduction to Chico. So we also forget something else, and that's about the importance of existential death anxiety and how it can change our behavior. How many of you know about existential death anxiety? Good. Okay. Well, I think you ought to know about it because now, at this present time that we're living in, it's enormously important. The thing about existential death anxiety is that it changes your behavior, and you don't really know how your behavior is going to be changed. And there are a number of studies that have been done on this, and so I thought I'd tell you about the studies just for you to see how powerful it is. In one study, 2 groups were formed and selected by questionnaire to be the same in personality. Okay, so 2 equal groups. And they were all judges. One half was given just the questionnaire, the personality questionnaire. The other, the same questionnaire, but it had an additional question, just one question. How long do you think you will live? That's all. So it seems to be a very minor difference between the questionnaires, but it was designed so that that question would trigger existential death anxiety. Now, we don't know we have it, but what we do know is we avoid death and discussions on death. But both these groups were asked to judge a minor crime. In the first group, where the judges were not asked to think about their mortality, they set an average fine of £50, and that was right for the crime. And so that is the baseline amount. But the group who had been asked about their mortality first, remember, this is the only difference, set a bond that was 9 times higher, 455. And what's amazing are 2 things. One is that the judges are supposedly trained to administer the law evenly and rationally. And secondly, when the experiment was explained to them, the second group all said, No way your stupid little questionnaire could have had any effect on my behavior. So we all have to remember that in fact our behavior is changed. And existential death anxiety is important now because of the situation that we're in. Turn on the news, what you hear: Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, people being killed everywhere. What we have in our society: ISIS attacks. So death is very high, so you can expect our behavior to be changed by this. If in fact you are showing the effects of it, then you will love people who share your beliefs. Now we're seeing a lot of that. They hate people who are different. And we're seeing a lot of that in our culture now. They sit closer to people who share their beliefs, and they sit further away from anyone who looks different. Now we're seeing a lot of that. And if we give such people in a laboratory setting an opportunity to physically harm someone who's different, they become much more hostile and vicious. And I think we're seeing that. So I think that existential death anxiety is having a lot of influence on our culture and our behavior now without us knowing it. And we will choose leaders who are charismatic, and that means that they aren't necessarily nice people, but they do in fact have a persuasive tone. You might like to think about our present leaders and the leaders in America. So I think it's important, and I think we ought to know about that. The Dalai Lama had something to say about whether ignoring death have consequences for us. And the answer to that is yes. Those who reject death suffer from a false sense of permanence, become more greedy, more self-serving and lustful, have more enemies, and become attached to my wealth, my health, my friends, my enemies, and my family. And I'm sure none of you, in fact, reject death. But if you did, then you're changing your behavior. But this talk is not about the physical phenomena of the dying body, or in fact what is happening if you don't understand the power that death has over you. It is about the mental states of the dying and what the dying may expect and what they could learn to help the process go more smoothly, because we really have got to change it. We know that death is the shutting down of the body and brain, but we know little about the mental dying process and the mental states of the dying. So, we're all attached to life and we won't face death. In our culture, we fear death and shut it out by not discussing it. Incidentally, how many of the people here have written their wills? Wow, what's wrong with you all? You're all going to go out and walk across the road and not be struck down by a taxi? How many of you are going to be buried and be burnt to a crisp, or your bodies? Now, there are a lot of you that haven't even decided. Look, these are questions that you have to face. The sooner you face them, the better. We still do not understand and have just started to study the subjective process of dying. There are very few studies of the phenomena surrounding the time of death. Fortunately, they're getting more and more. And there is uncertainty about whether such phenomena are spiritual or organic in origin. In other words, does it come from the brain? Does it come from beyond the brain? What are we talking about? That actually doesn't matter. It's the phenomena and the response of the people. Many carers feel they lack training in how to respond when told about these phenomena. So what are these phenomena? Now, many of you will, I think, have seen this picture that I've shown before. Who's seen this picture? Oh, not all of you. That's really cool. Well, we start with premonitions. Oh, you probably can't see it. Premonitions, then deathbed visitors, then a journey, then a new reality. And this is where the change is coming now. The new reality and our feelings about that figure that I've just removed so as not to scare you all. What we need is a more friendly one, like this guy. And so this is the picture now that I want you to see of death. And around death, there are a whole lot of things. Remember, death is an amazing change in conscious level. It's huge. Consciousness is just wiped out. And so there are a lot of phenomena that you would expect. Clocks which stop, animals which howl, bells which go off, a lot of light in the room, shapes leaving the body, presences in the room. These are all described, and it's not that they're rare. And you also have deathbed coincidences, which are enormously interesting. So let's look at some of these. Here's a paper, 2016, and I show it to you because it shows how quickly, but it's only now that people are beginning to recognize the value of it. And it's anybody who is in the position of having a relative who's dying will, I think, find it very useful. Here's another reference, and I would suggest you all did this because it's a very good talk. It's by Dr. Kerr, who is in fact a palliative care physician in Buffalo in the States, and he did a TEDx on it. So just put in YouTube, Dr. Kerr, TEDx Buffalo, and you'll get his talk. He's got some nice pictures there of people who are actually seeing their dead relatives. So let's think about end-of-life experiences. You get the diagnosis, it's terminal, you're going to die. Now this means that you're starting the dying process. None of you people will leave it so late because you've heard this talk. You'll think about dying right now. And most people are unprepared. Don't go into death unprepared. So we set out to find the nature of end-of-life experiences, and we interviewed the carers of the dying, started in 2003. I was very lucky because I applied to the ethics committee in Southampton, where I was working at that time. And I said I wanted to interview the dying. And they took a lot of time, and we discussed it with the ethics committee, and they finally said, no, you can't. But what we suggest is that you do a carer study. And so let's find out what actually goes on before you talk to the dying. I thought that was extremely sensible, and I'm very pleased that we did a carer study. We did a 5-year retrospective, 1-year prospective. We did it in England, Holland, Ireland, and 1 palliative care team, 2 English, 3 Dutch hospices, 1 nursing home. And the Irish study was done by Dr. Una McCulville. We've had, when I made this slide, it was about 1,000. It's about 1,500 emails. And so we interviewed doctors, nurses, auxiliary staff, chaplains, and volunteers. And so I'm really pleased that it was a carer study. Now, the present consensus is that 90% of those dying consciously will have an end-of-life experience. So most of you guys are going to get them. So you ought to know what they are and what their value is. I joined my daughter after an hour at the hospital, and we both sat chatting to my mother. She spoke to me about my life and my future. Note, she's quite lucid, all interspaced with references to these people who are now at the end of her bed. She told us that she wouldn't be there the next day, as these people would pick her up when she fell and take her on a journey. We were slightly spooked at her comments, but she was totally at ease. And in fact, she died the next day. So it occurs in clear consciousness. So deathbed visions often sit on the beds. Why? Those of you who have children will know exactly why. Because if you have a sick child and you go into the room to comfort it, what you do? Sit on the bed. These visions are very, very comforting. So who are the visitors? Well, we took 102 people and 118 visions, and we found that a quarter was parents who will come and pick you up. persons unknown, usually spiritual figures, in fact, in 17%. Many people don't have speech, but they greet them with open arms like that. Other relatives, all about 14%. Spouses aren't terribly popular, they're only 14%. Now, I've got really sad news for you guys. Only 3% see angels. Sorry, very few angels. If you want an angel, go to the Bible Belt of America, where John Lerner has done a similar study, and there are loads of them there. Not here. I don't know about Brazil. And the other thing which I'm sad about is that you're not going to be met by your cat or your dog. So, well, that's just the way it is. Occasionally friends. So it's mainly going to be parents. Well, there he is, you see, that horrid guy. I thought it was going to be my mum, but it is going to be his mother. Okay, now this is where we're beginning to expand our understanding of death, and it's actually fascinating and important. I learnt about this when I was in Jamaica. I was lying on the beach, or sitting on the beach, eating crab. I can remember it. And next to me was another member of the network whose daughter had just died, and I was asking her about it. And she told me this story, that in the last days of her daughter, in the last 2 to 3 days, note the timing, she was conscious, and she was conscious that there was a dark roof over her head and a bright light. Now, many of you have heard about bright lights, near-death experiences, of course. And she moved into a waiting place where beings were talking to her there to help her. Now, if you look at this and just take it for what it says, it looks as if she's moving in and out of a spiritual realm of some sort, and she's getting experience of what the dying process is. And I think the evidence for that is getting better. Everything will be okay, they were saying to her. They were loving beings. Her grandfather was amongst them, and she moved in and out of the place. Here's another one. My father was at my grandfather's bedside, deeply distressed. But my grandfather quietly said to my father, "Don't worry, Leslie, I'm all right. I can see and hear the most beautiful things, and you must not worry." And he quietly died, lucid to the end. So, again, it's not the usual description of what happens at death. I don't want to say much about this. It's terminal lucidity. It's absolutely fascinating for the doctors. And it is what the Victorians called lightening up before death. And Sir Henry Halford, 1893, a long-serving president of the Royal College of Physicians, wrote, "We've all observed the mind clear in an extraordinary manner in the last hours of life." And indeed it has. And we came across cases of this where somebody had had a stroke, hadn't moved for a couple of years, had to be turned every day. Just before death, they would sit up in bed, say goodbye to the relatives and die. And people who had Alzheimer's, hadn't recognized the family for 3 years. They would do exactly the same, sit up, say goodbye to the family who they now recognized, and then die, lie back and die. Very good paper on it if you want it. It's Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, 2009. And it's by Michael Nahm and Bruce Grayson. And they looked at terminal lucidity in patients with chronic schizophrenia and dementia. And all these people lost their illness just before death. What is going on? We don't actually understand yet. So that's terminal lucidity. Now, this is the area that I really want to concentrate on. It's this new reality going into it. And you will see that I've taken all those scary figures of death and even the nice figures of death away. And I've written something else there, which is called non-dual consciousness. How many of you know what non-dual consciousness is? Okay, well, I better explain. Non-dual consciousness is when you lose your ego, you lose the structure of yourself, and you become cosmic. This is essentially what it is. Cosmic is a shorthand, but it's a massive expansion of your consciousness. It's a massive expansion of your consciousness. So we're not here talking about a reduction in consciousness. We're talking about an expansion of consciousness. And I'm going to give you the evidence in a moment for this. You see, remember that death is a change in consciousness level, and I've put it slightly differently. I've seen it's a transformation of consciousness, and it is an expansion. So these transformations experienced by 90% of the dying. The world they go into, interestingly enough, is very much like the NDE world: light, love, and compassion, wholeness, and feelings of unity. I mean, this is so different from the way that one thinks about it. Waiting area with spiritual beings and dead relatives are present. Now, you can see this in the behavior of those who are dying. My life partner died of AIDS-related pneumonia at home in 1991. I spent the last week lying beside him at home much of the time. And on one or two occasions, a look of sheer ecstasy lit up his face as he smiled and looked at something I couldn't see. Well, come on, what's going on here? This guy's just about to die. Why is he going into ecstasy? I think he's going into ecstasy because his consciousness is changing. And this study I'm going to talk to you now is one which gives you the evidence. It's called Fear, Pain, Denial, and Spiritual Experiences in the Dying Process, and it's by Monica Rentz. Now, many of you may want to read this paper, and I hope you do. Where are you going to get it? Go to your email. That's my email address. Put just Monica Rentz in the subject bar, and I'll send you the papers. You don't have to say, "Gosh, Peter, that was a brilliant talk you gave." Or, "I didn't understand a word of it. Can I have the paper?" So just keep it nice and simple. Monica Rentz in the subject line. Now, this is what she says: spirituality includes more than just giving a response to a patient's spiritual attitude. Spiritual needs, as well as the patient's consciousness and communications, are changing during the dying process. Spirituality has to do with an altered-connectedness and consciousness. Okay? So quite different. And in situations of suffering, illness, and dying, individuals often have spiritual experiences of grace and encounters with the transcendent or the divine. Now, some of you will know that. This often happens when patients are in a state beyond their everyday consciousness, and so we're now going to look at that evidence. And she says this, but I also say this, because this is what our data has said, that spiritual experiences are powerfully independent of religious attitudes. It actually doesn't matter what you believe is going to happen, because the death process is, in a sense, independent of this. It doesn't matter if you think that you're just going to be brushed out with an airbrush. It won't actually make any difference to your death process. So whatever you think, you're going to go through it. So that's just to recommend that you actually all study it before you get watch as you cross the road when you get out of here. So let us examine the metric of dying. And Monica Rentz talks about the transition. So this is 3 phases in dying: pre-transition, transition, and post-transition. The chances are that you will all go through these. Hers is an amazing study because she interviewed people along 4 dimensions 3 times a day. 3 times a day, giving these dying people questionnaires. I mean, they'd all agreed to it. And so she's got a lot of very good data. Her first study was on 80 people dying of cancer, and she's done one on 250 people. So what's pre-transition? Now, I want to introduce you to the idea of cleaning. That's cleaning your minds. What on earth does cleaning your minds mean? Giving up your attachments. Remember, a shroud has no pockets. There's nothing you can take with you, so don't take your attachments. In pre-transition, patients may feel needs, thirsts, and the need for bonding, particularly the need and help from the carers of the dying who are with them. Pain and emotions, fear and joy. So it's more or less what we have now. Many fear losing control and their dignity and realize dying is inevitable. It's the dying is inevitable which is the biggest spur for you to give everything up. Give it all up. You don't want it. You don't need it. There's no need to secretly take a picture of your daughter with you. No, just give it up and just go with the dying process. So you can understand what the blocks to transition are. You can be locked in pre-transition due to denial. That's a potent one. I'm not actually dying, guys. I hope to be out of here in a week. Reactivated traumas. Yeah, I had an awful time, etc., etc. Struggle, strong attachments, or unresolved family issues. And awareness of previous negative behavior. These are all things which will hold you in pre-transition. And does it matter? Yeah, it does for you, because you're going to be in what's called terminal anxiety. The other thing is that terminal anxiety will probably result in your compassionate doctors giving you midazolam to wipe out your consciousness. Try to avoid that and go through the dying process. So give everything up. Support and release, such as finding meaning, may help patients to move on. So this is a good role for those who, in fact, are looking after them. If you get through that, you'll go to transition. And this itself implies the loosening of ego consciousness. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the dawning of non-dual consciousness. And remember that I actually used the word cosmic consciousness and attached to that, because it's a very wide state of consciousness. You may, if you're not clean enough, typically show signs of anxiety. You may simply be restless, or you may, in fact, have a reactivation of your old traumas. But you are now moving on to the final phase, which is the spiritual opening of past transition. Now, the ego is not dominant anymore. There isn't this little you that you like now and it talks to you all the time there. Patients seem to be serene in a state of being. I've given you an example of that already. Beyond anxiety, pain, or powerlessness. Most are unable to speak, but still hear. They communicate by gesture or single words, so you're getting very close to death. Sometimes reconciliation, visions, and peace are observed. Such transformative experiences may be comparable to a spiritual awakening or a patient who has completed the journey. So if you do your cleaning properly, give up your attachments, then there's every chance that your consciousness will expand into non-dual consciousness. Here's an example. Suddenly she stared intently up at the window. This lasted only a minute, but it seemed ages. She suddenly turned to me and said, "Please, Pauline, don't ever be afraid of dying. I've seen a beautiful light and I was going towards it. I wanted to go into that light. It was so peaceful, I really had to fight to come back." Sadly, she died the next morning, but I knew she had seen something that day which gave her comfort and peace when she knew she had only hours to live. So this is really important for us. I was nursing my friend who had definite views that there was no afterlife. I love this one. In her last couple of hours, she became very peaceful and arose from her unconsciousness, periodically saying clearly and happily such phrases as, "I'll know soon, come on, get on with it, then, I'm ready to go," and "it is so beautiful." She would immediately lapse back into unconsciousness after uttering these phrases. She was very obviously content and happy and at peace. It was a wonderful experience for her partner and me. Again, somebody who was experiencing the expansion of consciousness. So this is Monica Rentz's theory, series, 80 patients, 3 observations in 4 dimensions, as I've said: fear, pain, denial, spiritual experience. And for those, from those, she observed the transition level. Now here's the graph of a patient. If you can see this little red dot here, post-transition, transition, pre-transition. These are days along the bottom there. And this person, as you can see, is in pre-transition. Sorry, it's my fault. There we are. This bit is all pre-transition. Yeah, all along there, as you can see the dot. Then this patient came to transition that I've talked to you about, and they died from post-transition, so their consciousness had expanded into the universal at that point. And here's another patient. You can see that he got much further, much more quickly. Right at the beginning, pre-transition, straight down into post-transition, moved about a bit, and then had a long period of this expanded consciousness just before he died. So, what protects you when you're going through this process? There are a number of things that do. The first one of these is that one, I think, is meditation. Yeah. There they are. NDE, 80%, nearly 90%, nearly everyone who has an NDE don't suffer. Incidentally, the yellow columns are reduced suffering. The blue columns are suffering. So meditation and mystical experience look as if they're nice and protective. That one is quite protective, and that is, I think, like to pray. I can't actually see from here. This one, which is up with the others almost, and is the most important one that you can all remember. It's, I'm curious about the afterlife. So what you have to take home now is you've got to be curious. I'm curious. And as you're dying, you say to yourself, yeah, I remember that guy. He said, I had to be curious. What's going to happen next? What's it like? All those sorts of things, okay? So, what do we teach? There are end-of-life experiences. We have to explain them. We learn to give up attachment. A number of mental attitudes and practices can help meditation. We give confidence, and 90% of conscious patients have positive transcendent experiences. It is enough to look forward to death, strange, and be curious. So it's actually quite a clear message now. When do we teach? Well, we start in schools. Why teach children about death? Well, one of my grandsons had 2 hamsters, and they were in a cage in the garden. The fox got in and bit their heads off. Gosh, that's learning about death, isn't it? You want further education courses, and you want to make the information available during adult life. Encourage people to go counterculture and discuss death with friends. Now that you're all aware of what happens with existential death anxiety, you'll see that just discussing death with friends may get a change in behavior from them that they know nothing about. But you're now aware of that, so you can reassure them. You want structured programs in oncology, and you want to train hospice teachers. So you should be able to die where you want. Now, I'm going to do this very quickly because we're getting very close to time. If you can choose a hospice that you like and where they're caring for you, I found such a place in Rotterdam. I would go there and die there. And I'd die there because of two lovely people, Simone de Kuiper and Suzanne van Westerbrugge. They're beautiful people, and they run the hospice. And they confirmed that the phenomena we've been talking about today regularly occurs in their hospice. And they sound Tibetan chimes when the person is dying. And finally, they give you a candle to take home. So they're really caring people, lovely hospice. Now, I'm just going to say this because it's important. An old friend of mine, Professor Paul Robertson, he had an NDE. Now, remember, the NDE, in fact, protects you from all this. He was the leader of the Medici Quartet, and he, in fact, was operated on after he had an aortic aneurysm. Okay, so he was very seriously ill, and he was in hospital for a lot of that in the ITU, and for a lot of that unconscious. He was, he says, fully aware that he was dying. This man's unconscious, incidentally. And moving from this state to the experience of the potential unification of his consciousness with that of the universe. It's absolutely what we've been saying. As I lay there waiting, I felt myself die beautifully, ecstatically, transcendentally. I saw eternity and shed the whole of myself joyfully in order to become unified with it. What a statement. So, in fact, it's just another verification of what we've been talking about. Why did he come back? Because his family pulled him back. So watch this. If you go into people's rooms when they're dying, they'll become very aware if you don't want to let them go. They might even, in fact, stop the process and try again when you're not in the room or later. When Paul actually died 2 years ago, his wife and family were with him. And this time they encouraged him to go. And I wanted to go and see him because he agreed that I could be there. And he'd tell me what it was like. But I missed it by a day. And he woke up slightly, probably from a light coma, and told his wife, because I wasn't there, I must let Peter Fenwick know there's nothing new. We've all been there before. So that's the most wonderful validation you can get of it. So that's the final crumbling of the echo of the ego. And remember what he said. As I lay there wilting, I felt myself die beautifully, ecstatically, transcendently. I saw eternity and shed the whole of myself joyfully in order to become unified with it. Well, if that's true, what are we afraid of? Okay? So you need to look at the data and think about your own views of dying. I'd like to thank my colleagues who took part, and thank you all very much for listening.